Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are lucky to have Aziz Rajani, who runs an architectural studio, Studio Liminal Play. Aziz did his architecture from Singhat College of Architecture, Pune University, and graduated in 2011. And continued to do his master's program. He did his majors in history, theory, and criticism, and minors in conservation from SEPT University, Ahmedabad. He continued and worked for almost 8 years with Architecture Autonomous, architect Gerald Acuna. He worked there for 5.5 years, and he co-founded Architecture Autonomous Workshops in association with architect Gerald Acuna. And it aims to contribute to the knowledge system of the students and professions in the field of design and architecture through hands-on experience of unique construction techniques and design. We would love to hear more about that, Aziz, in your presentation, if possible. He continued to work as the assistant professor at SJP School of Architecture and Planning, Bangalore. And later, in 2019, he co-founded Studio Liminal Play, a transdisciplinary design practice established by architect Archita Bandopadhyay, Aziz Rajani, and Pradeep Kampatia. Their operation is within but not limited to the realms of architectural design, interior design, product design, art, and research. The studio thinks and creates on the thresholds of multiple disciplines. The studio at its core believes that the design process is the dialogue. The spirit of their design and space-making process respects and allows for myriad voices and personalities to be in one place. And today's talk is titled Experiences in the Contingent World of Architectural Practice. And I will leave the definition and the presentation to Aziz.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, sir. I think it was a great introduction from your end. Basically, what I'll be doing today is talking about my experiences in the field of architecture and architectural practice. And what I'll be concentrating more on, since Sir's already told you about it, my experience with working with Architecture Autonomous, that is Gerard Acuna's firm, for 5.5 years, and going into academics with continuation into teaching and running my own studio. Basically, I've gone through certain parts of architectural practice, and it evolves me at each and every stage. And what I would like to do today is share my experiences of this particular practice. So my title of the presentation is basically Experiences in the Contingent World of Architectural Practice. I would actually like to start from a small story. I actually started working in Architecture Autonomous. This is in Goa, in Torda itself. This was in about 2010, and it was my place of internship as well, right? And that was my introduction to architectural practice, right? And I would actually like to start the story from this particular gate to our office, right? This is my first week in the studio, and I've been given a particular project to design that particular gate and get it executed by one of my seniors called Sarita, and she was my colleague in the future years. And the task was very simple. The gate needed to be designed and fixed very easily. Her only criteria was that the symbol of A is supposed to be there for the Architecture Autonomous. That was her only criteria as such. Now, my particular job was to understand the site and design the gate. It seems like a very small project, and since it was my first week after 4.5 years of studying, I was all prepared to go in and give it my best shot to get my creations executed, right? So this is the gate what I was talking about. And I go back to my drawing board and I complete my whole design. And Sarita tells me that the welder is somewhere in the school, which is in our campus itself, and is ready to execute my design, right? So I go there, and then I realize that I have to operate with only certain materials from the site, right? And these are the materials from scrapyard. And if anyone is familiar with Sir's work, architect Gerard Lacuna's work, basically he works a lot with uh, materials from scrapyards. And this was one of those projects where I could see many of those scrap materials, including a disc brake from a bicycle, right? And I speak to the welder, I give him a particular drawing with the printout. And what he tells me is the mesh won't be possible because the mesh is gonna melt away when he tries to weld it. And also, the disc brake is not gonna be welded to the mesh as well, right? This had completely changed my design, right? And on top of that, he asked me, Sir, this particular part is sloping and it has rocks. So what is the height do you want me to weld it at? Right. So I was like, it depends on how much the pipe will go in. So, and he expects an answer for me for this particular detail, right? And me coming out of just an architectural school, I have no idea of how the pipe will enter into the ground, right? I go back, I'm too tensed on my, I go back to my drawing board, I try and understand how can I solve these particular problems. And I go to Sarita and I say, see, this is something what he's saying, it's not possible, right? And Sarita is like, just try and talk to him and see what problem he has with your design, right? So what I've understood is I was giving too many curvatures, right? And the other problem, interestingly, what I found out was that I was taking a lot of time to design, and he had to leave at 5:30, right? Of course, he didn't mind working after 5:30 because it's an overtime for him. But this is something what my admin didn't allow me to do because it takes a lot of overtime payment, right? And also the second issue was the welding machine which is there. That was a heavy duty machine which takes a lot of wattage, which used to create a problem in the electrical line for the neighbors as well, right? And they had taken the permission till 5:30. And this was something which at the end of the day, I haven't taken into account when I'm on my drawing board, right? Of course, at the end of the day, Sarita took over the project, and I had to take a back seat. But at the end of the day, this was my introduction to an architectural practice, right? Definitely, I was sad and disappointed, right? And I was thinking about if I could still make it to the architectural world. But it, now that I reflect back to that particular moment, it does raises some question that each particular project has its own elements and factors which come into picture, right? Which is just beyond designing, that to designing on the drawing board itself. Yeah. So today my lecture is going to be talking about what are these factors and what are these elements, and how do I define contingencies at all. So my presentation today would not be talking about just the learnings from working with architecture Gerard Lacuna. It won't also be just talking about working with Architecture Autonomous, that is the firm and the studio. Also, it won't be talking about learnings from the projects what I was a part of, right? But this is very important to note, the learnings from working with the projects, because at the end of the day, when we look at different factors affecting the projects, the factors aren't just people involved that we call the stakeholders, right? So for example, we have the clients, we have the users, which are not necessarily the client, we have designers, we have consultant, we have also other people involved in terms of contractors, vendors, right? But keeping these people aside, other factors also come into picture of social, economical, and political factors as well, right? And I will be talking about all these factors together, which in simple words is the definition for contingency, right? But I would like to actually quote Kojin when she says, because architecture is an event, it is always contingent, right? And what I found very interesting was the use of the word event, right? What we are talking about in the definition, what Kojin actually says, is considering architecture as an event, right? And not a product, a physical product or manifestation in the world, right? It redefines how we think about architecture, right? And what she further goes on to say is architecture is thus a form of communication with the other, who by definition does not follow the same set of rules. And the others definitely includes all the stakeholders, but also it includes the social and economical aspects as well as political aspects as well, right? Today's presentation will be an excerpt from Architecture Depends by Jeremy Till. And I will be quoting his book a lot. It's definitely a must read for anyone who is interested in looking at contingencies. And now I'm coming to what does a contingency mean, right? In William Rash has simply put it as contingency is the fact that things could be otherwise than they are, right? In architectural field, if you see the fact that my drawing on my drawing board could not directly be converted into an executed design tells me a lot about the field itself, right? It's not something what I had taken into account, but definitely something what I have encountered, right? And this particular part is something what is a intrinsic part of architecture. So I'll. This is something what I think each and every firm should do when they are presenting their work. Is it builds a context of how the projects have come into picture, right? In this particular case, I would actually like to introduce certain members of our firm and how our firm actually work together. This is, of course, Gerard Dacuna, and we have two of the associates, Komil and Nirmala. And we, two architects, Sarita and me, with certain other designers. There's Akash here and Arpita here who are interning at our time. But what is also interesting in our firm is also we have a different composition of, we have engineers on board, we have transportation team on board who arranges for all the materials. We have helpers on the board as well, who definitely are jack of all trades, right? And help us with each and every intrinsic detail of the projects. We do have carpenters and we have masons working in our team itself, right? And this is the intrinsic part of what the firm is. And this is where I'll be starting off with some of the projects what I had worked on. So I'll be starting off with Shiksha Niketan Amphitheater. This is located in our campus, office campus in Torda, Goa. And I had the privilege of working in the internship for the bottle wall on top of the amphitheater, right? This is actually the plan of the school. So this is the theater on top, and the theater entry is from this side. Interestingly, till date, whenever I go back to the office and the site, I always see certain changes different than when you visited many years later as well, right? One of the additions were these bottle walls, and the requirement for the bottle walls was very simple, right? There was a cantilever slab which was running on the periphery of the terrace, and the wall had to, of course, to protect the audience from falling down, as well as it had to protect the vision of any spectators sitting in the seats and looking at the theater, right? Uh, Interestingly, Shiksha Niketan has been built not just by scrap materials because Sir wanted to use it, but because many of Shiksha Niketan started off with uh, Sir's wife Nisha's foundation itself. That is the Nisha's Play School, which is a pre-primary school, and this is a primary school, right? And the whole project was funded by the office itself. And of course, because of the low budget, many of the parents have contributed different architectural materials, right? And many of the second-hand wood, some have given their beds where the steel could be reused, some have given tiles to be used for flooring, and so on and so forth, right? Interestingly, one of the materials what was received were these bottles. I'm assuming that he had asked for these particular bottles to be used in Shiksha Niketan, but at the end of the day, we received a lot of bottles, right? And I was left with a site empty terrace with many bottles. And my task was to figure out how do I actually make these walls. One of the interesting things about these particular walls is if you notice, this particular parapet wall is actually a freestanding wall, right? It's not located between a structure, between two columns or between two walls, right? And there is a longitudinal force exerted by the bottles in each particular course at the end, right? And our task was to design a self-supporting wall where the bottles could actually be holded by another structure or other courses. That's what we call stiffeners. So if you see in the plan, basically these are the stiffeners. Interestingly, what worked for us and what was totally in demand was signature whiskey, right? And also blue ribbon whiskey, gin, because these were rectangular bottles, and rectangular bottles really helped us at least cope me understand and relate to brick courses much better, right? But of course, we had other beer bottles, wine bottles. We had even medicine bottles. We had ketchup bottles because these were some things what were donated by the students, right? And I won't go into the details of each and every project, but I'll try to concentrate on the main topic, that is how does the contingencies act. So these are some of the finished wall details. As you can see, the entrance is from the front here. This was our first testing walls. That's why you see many of the Tuborg bottles, because that was something I was very comfortable with, because two signatures bottle gave me 3 courses of Tuborg beer bottles, right? And it was much easier to start off with. And of course, at certain point, I was out of Tuborg bottles. So then I go for Kingfisher. But slowly and steadily, we realize how do we work with these bottles, right? And slowly we create these ventilators, which are very important because during windy monsoons, we are quite assured by these ventilators that not enough of pressure is exerted on the walls, right? We developed drains in the walls as well. We, of course, created an archway. This is definitely done by Sir. And also we played around with the bottles itself, because it's a part of the school itself and it's a part of this fun amphitheater we've got on top, right? Interestingly, I would take you to one of the stories of development, right? So of course, this is what I was left with before I started the project. And I come and I see definitely different types of bottles all around the place, right? And what was interesting was each and every student of the school was given a small leaflet, what they are supposed to take home and convince their parents to give them 2 empty bottles, right? And I remember certain parents coming to me and asking which types of bottles do we take because we do not drink at home, right? And but it was a lot of fun to see these 4-year-olds get out of the bus with 2 bottles carrying. And what is interesting to note is these smaller gestures of students bringing these particular bottles and them being a part of the architecture. Uh, is totally different from how we design on the board, right? And these students feel a part of the structure itself. When I say structure, I do not just mean the built form, I also mean the social aspect of that particular place, right? And the structure of the school, how it has come up, how the curriculum has come up, right? And they do not just feel happy because they are giving the bottle and they can point out to the bottles, which of course the students did, and during the lunch break and after the school ended, and these guys were very curious in coming up. But also what was interesting is they felt as if they are giving a part and they have a responsibility of contributing something to the concept called Shiksha Niketan, right? And that's why you have the alumnus, which is very strong as well in this particular case, right? But the story what I'm about to tell you is something to do with my personal experience, right? It's something what even today when I visit that particular place, I wish I had not done one of those walls. That is the second wall, just after my Tuborg and Kingfisher bottles were over. This was the second part of the project, and basically I was out of bottles and I had the question of how do I go further, because I just have lime bottles left. And this is something what sirs told me: you go ahead and you use the bottles whatever is available, because definitely we have to use each and every bottle, because the children are very particular about their bottles being used in the walls, right? So I go around, I tell the masons, please use whatever bottles you want, but make sure the bottles in each and every course have the same height. And of course at the end of the day I get this chaotic wall, right? And this is a learning curve for me, which actually made me realize even if I have these contingency of availability of bottles, I have to channel it in some way, right? And I can't just leave it as a chaos, but I have to realize what are the different gaps available in this particular chaos and try to streamline these particular chaos in the certain way, right? So then we end up with these different patterns of walls in here, right? I'll take you to the next step of the same bottle wall. This is actually the stage, and school, of course, after 3 years or 4 years of building the bottle wall, now wanted something new, which is a stage cover, of course, because it is Goa and they wanted covers during the monsoon, right? And this is an interesting project in itself, because it's actually taught us a lot of at least my personal experience of how to use bamboo as a material and how to use natural elements as materials, right, as building materials. Here we've actually used treated bamboos with steel junctions, and this has been there from 2013 and it is still here. It's of course an experimental project. The process actually starting off with a simple idea of how about we have a tensile structure which is actually holded up and pulled up by the trees next to it, right? And this was very interesting because this was still a discussion within the design team. It was me, Sarita, and Sir together, and we were discussing about how can we build this particular structure, because the school had many different requirements of even holding huge, large amphitheater speakers and suspended from this particular structure, right? You have different scenes coming down, so the Rapunzel scene will come down and it will be interchanged by, let us just say, a Lion King scene as well. And parallelly we have the curtains which will run through, additional to the lights which are there, right? So then we thought, how about we go for a space frame structure so that the structure can have the feasibility of hanging different things at different places, right? And we got into conversation of about how can we make it more experimental in terms of how can we make it much more exciting, because we've got the bottles here, we've got this amazing school using different materials around, right? And it got us thinking about how people talk about bamboo being as strong as steel, right? And how about we start exploring that? So that was basically a starting point to use bamboo. Of course, we started with using bamboo as a section of the space frame itself. And we had to design each and every junction. So you have the junction which has 8 elements, 4 diagonals and 4 horizontal elements. And the junction itself holds the bamboo by this holder, and this is a metal holder. That's what we've come up with, right? And this is where we get into picture our vendor Conback from Maharashtra, and from them. It wasn't just me. You can see in the photo, this is Anil, our head mason, and Vinay here, his assistant in that particular sense. And we all three went to Conback and we learned some of the drilling techniques, cutting techniques of how to operate with this national material. Of course, Anil and Vinay have worked with bamboos in their house, right? And they know certain things about bamboo and how the bamboo operates, right? So they come up with this stand which will basically assemble 100 of segments per day, and we had about 300 segments or so on and so forth. And we assemble these in the module and we've put it up. So we've got a shuttering on the stage, we put up these particular modules pulleyed away, and then we've come up with this particular structure. Okay. Now, the detail what I would like to get into is instance of developing that particular design, right? And like I've already mentioned, we came up from a steel structure to using a bamboo structure. And using a natural material definitely has its own advantages. But what we are used to in an educational system are standardizations, right? So our engineer is very clear, he's never worked with bamboos at all. But what he could help us out with is giving a design for steel, right? And it was our job to understand how he's using the steel design and try to interpret it in using the bamboo in collaboration with Conback, right? So a bamboo usually came up to 5.5 meters to 6 meters. And what is interesting to note is that the bamboo, of course, tapers at the end. You all must be very well aware of that. And it turns out that the bamboo is quite strong at the bottom and fairly strong in the middle and not that strong in the top, right? So the first thing, and of course this is Mallappa, our helper, he said, sir, ye particular cheese chalega, use this instead of steel. And I was like, how do you know ki it is strong enough? And he climbs and he jumps twice. He was like, sir, we do this for our houses at home when we build it with wood or bamboo. So somebody climbs on top, stands and sees, jumps around, satisfied with the strength, we come down, right? But we wanted to go into, of course, much more detail because we don't want this roof falling on the children as well, right? So we do some of the testings as well. Can't be less than 10 thickness, and the outer dia can't be less than 45, right? And this is something what we had to use. But on the other hand, the vendor who's got a lot of experience with the bamboos in the same area from Malwani, he says that you've got these particular thicknesses, you've got the outer dia as well, but this does not qualify the strength of each and every segments, right? And there are certain things we know we can see and touch, and we can see where the nodes of the bamboos are, whether the strands are overlapped or not, and we can tell you if the bamboo is strong enough or not, right? And what was interesting was there was this negotiation between the what engineer was saying and what the Conback buyer was saying, and we were the ones channeling this negotiation, right? And finally the criteria was satisfied for the structural engineer there, right? So none of the members crossed these particular limits which were put, and the Conback guys only sent us the bamboos which they felt were strong enough, right? So the bottom and the top layer, horizontal layers are 8, which is the strongest, which is the bottom part. And the diagonals were B, because these do not take as much load as A does, right? And the C's were basically split up and used as reinforcements in our other projects, right? What is interesting to note is these shared experiences on the same background, right? So the convex guy is saying, I know the touch and feel of the skin and I know how the nodes of the bamboos are. On the other hand, the explicit knowledge of the structural engineer coming together on this particular platform, and they sharing their situated knowledge, right? Which kind of helps the contingent world of architecture, right? None of these guys alone or we alone could have done this particular project, right? We coming together definitely helped us, right? Now I come to the other project. This is called Chronicles Club. This is in small Vagator in Goa. It's done in 2013. This is actually a long time ago. Interestingly, so this is the site how we had got it. Basically, it's a waterfront club. So the requirement was for a dance floor. You had to have a bar and a dining lounge, right? And some of the VIP lounge as well. And the site, what we actually got was this amazing site looking at the Arabian Sea. You've, of course, got this famous Om rock cut restaurant on the left. And the site actually dropped to about 18 meters, right? And you had these laterite rocks and a small laterite quarry at the bottom, right? And you had, of course, these coconut trees spreaded across the whole site. Interestingly, what we and Sir actually had proposed this was basically certain zonings, right? So this is the quarry which is downstairs next to the sea, right? And we thought we would make the dance floor here, right? So you are just next to the sea. You have the access to the beach whenever you want when you're dancing as well. And just next to it was the second level, which was supposed to be a waterside bar with certain steps going down to the dance floor. You come on top and you have the dining lounge at this particular level somewhere. You have the main dining area here, and you have the VIP area right on top. And what we have are the services going on the left. So we have the scheme, but at the end of the day, we do not have the final drawings, right? And this is something what Sir was very particular about, that we won't be designing each and every detail. I'll come back to that later. But what I'll do right now is just run you through the project itself. Since the site was right on the shore and it was a leased site, interestingly, it was sanctioned uh, as a seaside shack and not a official club, right? That means it had to wind up its whole setup during the end of summer, close down for the monsoons, and then restarted during the October. And anything we did according to the CRZ rules, which are applicable for any structure which come within 100 meters from the shoreline, was that anything on site needed to be temporary. That means anything we did we should be able to take it out and give the site back as the site was, right? So one of the major starting point for us was temporality. How do we get the nature of temporality in this site, right? Of course, we went with certain techniques. I'll be telling you some certain things about it. So we've got sandbag retaining walls in combination with dry stone masonry with vaults and arches and domes. On top of that, we have wooden structures which are basically dug up and grounded inside this particular wall and inside these particular structures. And then we, of course, have certain modular elements. For example, we have these small concrete boxes which could be put in during the construction, right? Casted before. So these are pre-casted blocks, which could hold the railing, which could also hold certain electrical boxes and could be taken up and taken home whenever the site needed a dismantling, right? One of the most interesting parts of the project was this is actually the quarry what we are talking about, and it has this lining of, this is basalt actually with certain laterites formations besides it as well. And we had to take into account all the fissures in the wall itself and the stone wall itself, and the design had to be developed accordingly. This is, of course, the final product of how it looks. What I would actually like to concentrate about in this particular project is something what most of uh, us as designers are not used to. That is uh, designing on site and not having a drawing. Trust me, it was very hard for me to find this particular drawing, which is still an incomplete drawing. It doesn't have any text. It's just a plain site with certain areas in it, because there was no drawing at the end of the project as well. And the reason for that is also the executed drawings to be made were quite hard to document. And we had already handed over the project itself. But we definitely had these smaller details. But if you see, the rock features is something which is very organic and could not be documented. This particular drawing itself, which is actually the staircase wall, which is developing right now, also took about half a day to be documented. These are as-built drawings as well, right? And that's when we decided that we won't be making any as-built drawings. We would be designing on site, right? And this is an idea which comes from Sir, right? And he has certain methods of using chalk powder and seeing how each and every element on site, as well as how the mason is confident about certain rocks and how he's confident about certain heights of the walls as well, come together in this particular process, which is very interestingly doesn't come in the drawing itself, right? So this is us here actually marking it on site as it comes on top, right? So this is contingency to its core, where you're using not just people's opinion like I've shown you in the last project. Here it's also about the conditions. It's also about where the tide is down, we are down uh, in the quarry itself, because the water level is down. And this construction has happened during the monsoons. That means the whole area used to be filled with water when it was a heavy shower or it was the tidal waves coming in, right? But a very interesting quote from Jeremy Taylor. In all cases, what happens is that the drawing becomes the ground for working out ideas, divorced from their initial context, eventually becoming an end to itself rather than a means to its end, right? On the other hand, we have this particular interesting method, and I'm not stating that this is the only solution out there, but this is something what I faced and experienced with this particular project, where the drawing doesn't become just a mean of communicating and working out all the ideas, but the working on site and developing things on site, marking things on site becomes a means to take into account contingencies and the temporal nature of that particular project, and also the social and economical aspect of the project. Another instance of the same project was something to do with the bar roof. I'm not very sure you can see it here. And of course, we've got the tensile roof, what you can see very clearly in this particular photo as well. So I was very insistent on these being thatch roofed. This is coconut thatch being used on the bar roof, as well as the agronet being used as tensile structures. And I remember having this conversation with Sir, where we said, why don't we use tensile materials, where we could actually use certain very long lasting materials still temporarily, because it can be taken down and so on and so forth. Instead of using agronet, because the lifespan of agronet would be about a year. Even the bamboos what we use weren't treated bamboo like we've done it in Shiksha Niketan project, right? And his reply was very simple, and I didn't understand it quite well back then, but I do understand it right now, and I have a different perspective of the project itself. Very interestingly, he said that each and every this particular project needs to come down every season, right? That means it has to go up every season. It's like it's equivalent to putting up your stall. It's an activity in itself, right? And each time they put up a stall, let them decide what do they want to put up, what don't they want to put up, what do they want to add, what don't they want to add, right? And very interestingly, this is the evolution. So this is actually how we left the particular project. Of course, without the hippie posters out there. Uh, and this is the next to next season, I guess. But you can see these bamboos coming into picture, and these ropes of lights being put down, and these rays of LED lasers being put up in place of and adding to this particular structure. And they take the tensile structure to the next level, adding some of the thatch on their own near the lounge itself, right? And you can see them developing the stage as well. What is interesting to note is this particular freedom of that particular platform, right? There has to be, he's provided certain gaps and certain opportunities to be developed in this particular project. When we say particular project, I mean not just the physicality of it, but also economical, social, as well as cultural values of it, right? And the gaps which are left, interestingly, brings out and evolves that particular project. And interestingly, Jeremy Till really quotes something to the dot. Architecture is subjected not only to elemental forces of time, the weather, physical decay, what I was talking about the bamboos coming down, about the agronet being spoiled, or the thatch being spoiled, the coconut thatch, right? But it's also to the social forces of time, users changing function, economic obsolescence. The architect only starts what time and others continue. So I thought this is definitely a very good example to talk about contingencies and how a project is not a snapshot of time. How we as designers sometimes get carried away, how our photographs of a certain completed projects need to have certain elements in certain places to be photographed, right? But the project itself is beyond what the designers have imagined in the initial spaces, have executed, and has gone beyond the occupation of users, and the project keeps changing through time, right? And it is very important to bring this particular framework where these plays can happen of the contingencies in your particular project. This is the last project of all I'll be explaining from the Architecture Autonomous series. This is actually one of the last projects what I've worked with in that particular firm as well. It's called Mangrove Walk. It's near the Pato area in Panjab. So this is the site plan. Interestingly, our firm had done the central library building, which is I think about 8,000 to 10,000 square meter building. It's a huge complex. It's the state library for Goa. And this was a part of a competition entry, right? The proposal of the mangrove walk and a pedestrian bridge and a state museum, which was proposed at that particular time, right? And this was designed as a urban hub for Panjim itself. In 2010, if I'm right about it, uh, didn't execute wasn't executed in the same time itself. What is imagine and executed in the same time itself? The vision was already there for the particular project, and how this would turn into this urban hub, which would connect the old part of Panjim, which is the Fontaines area, and the commercial area of Panjim, which is the Park Pro Plaza, which also has the Panjim bus stand. That's the outstation bus stand for the city. But what was also interesting to note is the mangrove walk and the bridge kept on changing during the course of time. In terms of, it wasn't just the original designs which couldn't be executed, it was also about the conditions in which the projects were being executed. So finally, we have the mangrove walk being executed almost 8 years later, right? And we recently have the pedestrian walkway project with a small plaza coming in soon. The State Museum project was floated as a competition which we entered. Unfortunately, the project didn't go ahead. But what is interesting to note is the vision of that particular urban node and what the firm wanted from this particular urban node remain the same. But the physicality of these particular projects and intrinsic details of these particular projects kept changing because of these contingencies, right? So, and another point of this project being very interesting and very different from the rest is also because this was a government project and it came under the smart city scheme. So this is a smart city scheme Panjim area, which was taken by some of the GSIDC heads, and that meant each and every part of the project had to be tendered out, right? And each and every part of the project had to be BOQ'd with certain specification put into a project where we are talking about a mangrove walk, which needed to take into account each and every mangrove tree and the life below it in the creek itself, right? So what is interesting to note is Sohad actually and the firm actually came out with this particular scheme, right? So these are modules. So I'm not very sure if you can see, but the whole walkway is designed into these small modules of 2.5 meters by 2.5 meters. So you can see these in the section, right? And these 2.5-meter modules could be turned and twisted around, or could be added, or could be subtracted according to how the site would allow us, right? And it takes into account these entrances to these particular nodes, right? So you have these future node for the walkway, and you have these very interesting nooks and corners where it opens up, right? What was interesting to note is the tenders had a very different plan, because we didn't get a final plan till we actually used the piles to get a framework, to get the grid itself, right? And what we had actually tendered was very different from this. But interestingly, what remained the same were the quantities of wood what we used and the running meter of these particular modules. That really helped us, right? So modularity of this particular project, understanding the contingency of the tendering process. Here it is very different from economical aspects. It's not like the money was a factor here. The factor was once it goes into tenders, won't be changed, and it will be seen on site and assessed on site, because it's a governmental projects, right? So of course we have uh, module meet. This was a contractor through the tender process, so we don't personally know the contractors themselves. And what is interesting to note is the design changed after this particular stage, right? And I'll be coming back to that stage later. So you can see these particular modules. So each and every part of the whole mangrove walk could be dismantled, right? And could be replaced in the future, because at the end of the day we do realize it's a governmental public project, and anything which rots because it is exposed to such an environment basically could be taken out and changed. On the right side you could see the pile testing of taking certain loads, and these testings reveal something about the loads what the piles could take. So we have munda wood which we have used, and we have teak wood used on the top, right? So you have these horizontal running meter lengths, and wherever we encountered routes between 2.5, we could just change it in one of the x directions, right? Or we could change the whole system of the primary members into the y directions as well, according to what the site wanted. So the flexibility was between 1.5 meters to 2.5 meters center to center, how we could place the grid, right? And that's how we came up with these interesting nodes and junctions, and these decisions were taken on site. So you could see you can't really step into without gumboots, and you have snakes and frogs basically nurturing into this particular place. And this is something what we had to be very careful about. We don't disturb the setting of mangroves itself. And finally, we have the railings with seaters with certain floorings which come into pictures as well. Interesting to note is that this particular part of Panjim, that is the mangrove walk, is listed in top 10 Instagrammable posts in spots in Goa. So it has taken into a different shape. I'm sure everyone should, whenever they visit Goa should definitely have a look at this. But what I would like to actually talk about is this particular aspect of when it came to sourcing the material, that is the Munda piles. What interestingly happened was we had proposed a dia of 200 which was very hard for the contractor to get. And uh, what we realized was that there are certain parts of the states which only outsource certain materials of certain quantities, and it was going over the quantities, right? And we had to change it to maximum of 150 dia. So what interestingly happened was our design system had totally changed. So if you can see, the primary members split into two, 1 and 2, with the same sizes. So we had 4-inch by 6-inch. Now we have 2-inch by 6-inch and 2-inch by 6-inch, which is bolted together to the pipe, right? And the whole system actually changed. And what is interesting to note is that the framework actually allowed this to happen, right? So when certain contingencies were taken into account about how the tendering process actually works and how the culture of a project going into the government department actually works, you have these things already taken into account. So it technically does not really reduce my quantities or increase my quantity, because my piles have to be placed much closer than they were being expected to. But the framework in which this design was developed and the modularity in which this design was developed really allowed these contingencies to play around, we could play around with, and different players also having the flexibility of proposing certain things, or at least putting across certain things, right? And designers not being, or the client not being stubborn upon certain aspects of the design what they want to implement. I'll be taking you through the last project for the day. This is one of the projects what we have done as a studio in Bangalore. This is something called Negotiating Static Kinetic Play. It was a competition entry for a co-living space which was proposed. We are talking about flexibility in that particular sense, and we are talking about many different players coming together in developing this particular competition, right? And interestingly, we are talking about the users who are gonna use the co-living. We are talking about workers who are gonna be employed in these co-living and the area around. We are talking about the people who actually invest in the funds in these startups, the co-living startups as well, and how would they benefit through this particular schemes. And finally, we talk about designers, because it was an imaginary process with a project with an imaginary site. So what we interestingly have proposed was different distribution of control. So different people have different control over this particular project. We've set a certain grids, and the designers could definitely play around this particular grid, use it in however way they wanted, keeping in mind certain amenities which had to go into picture, and certain systems which were flexible enough to be dismantled. So you can see certain arrangement of how we've shown. I'm not going into the detail, of course. Of course, on the other hand, we have the occupants where they could actually carry away their walls with them wherever they move. So you have the app design where you could actually lift your particular wall where you have scribbled or you have painted it in certain way, carry it with you, transport it to some other places, and use it in a certain way in your home. And you also have the flexibility of deciding how much you can afford a particular place, or what type of place do you need. Do you need a kitchen? Do you need a balcony instead? Do you need a smallest room possible ever to reduce your cost, etc.? And then finally, you have the proprietors, where you take into account economics of how it could work, and you think about how different companies could actually benefit from each other working together with these systems, right? But finally, what I would want to talk about is this final aspect of distribution of control, right? And how we actually thought of this particular project, rather than taking this particular project and the competition ahead in terms of designing each and every physical aspect of this detail, we thought of zooming out and proposing a system, a framework for the co-living space, where you have an app which we had designed as well, right? You have certain grids which have been thought of, certain amenities, certain services which have been thought of, right? And the development of system was served on a platter for the co-living proprietors, which were a part of the competition as well, to have a discussion between the designers whom they hire in the future, between the occupants taking the survey with them, they as proprietors operating this particular place, the workforce themselves, and we as a part of Studio Liminal Play as well. So what was interesting to know is the framework wasn't a concrete framework at the end of the day. It was just a starting point of discussion, right? Just an idea thrown across, right? At the end of the day, it's not about this chaotic randomness proposition. It's still a discussion based on certain framework and certain system which had been brought up. So that was my last project. I would like to stop with this last statement by Jeremy Till. For the contingent architect, the book is replaced by the project as the site of curiosity, and the intent is guided by aspirations to reform spaces in the name of others. Right. So, what could be interesting for us, looking back to my years in college, and years in academics, in practice, and my years ahead as well, is what is important is we are considerate and we ask questions. We are considerate about other stakeholders as well as other contingencies. When people talk about context, I interpret it as taking into account all the contingencies as possible. And each and every project is subjective. And each and every project has a different structure of these contingencies. Not all contingencies are put at certain levels, right? You being a part of that particular project makes you a part of these contingencies, and you playing around with whatever is available and others contributing their role in this together will definitely make the projects much more interesting and much more approachable in that particular sense. So I will like to end the presentation here. Thank you very much.
Aziz, a splendid presentation.
Yeah, hi.
It was really great having you in our webinar, Aziz. I think we got to see varied kinds of projects that you have implemented with Sir Da Kunna. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.